Hello everyone, I am the Midnight Storyteller. I know you clicked on this video to relax for a while or perhaps to let my voice help you fall asleep. Before you do, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you now? And what time is it? Alright, find a comfortable position and relax. I've always considered myself a rational person. As a cybersecurity specialist, I deal in facts, evidence, and logical explanations. My world is built on verifiable data and concrete solutions. That's why I installed the comprehensive security system in my home 3 months ago, but because I appreciate the peace of mind that comes with knowing exactly what happens under my roof. The system was top of the line, motion sensors at every entry point, cameras covering all approaches to the house, and indoor monitoring in the main living areas. My wife, Sarah, thought I was being excessive. Who needs cameras inside their own home? She'd asked with a laugh. I explained it was just an extra precaution, especially when either of us traveled for work. She reluctantly agreed, though I could tell she found it slightly intrusive. For the first 2 months, the system performed exactly as expected. It captured the occasional delivery person, neighborhood cats crossing our yard, and our own comings and goings. Nothing unusual, nothing unexpected, until last Tuesday. I was at my desk, reviewing some code for a client project, when I received a notification on my phone. The system had compiled the previous night's activity into a convenient summary video. I often skimmed through these during my morning coffee, but I'd been particularly busy that day and hadn't gotten around to it. The video began normally, Sarah and I having dinner, watching TV on the couch, then heading upstairs to bed around 11 p.m. The house remained still and quiet for several hours. Then at exactly 3:17 a.m., the front door camera activated. A man stood at our door. He was tall, slender, with dark hair neatly combed back. He wore a charcoal gray suit that looked slightly outdated, perhaps from the early 2000s. His face was partially obscured by shadows, but I could make out sharp cheekbones and a straight nose. He didn't ring the doorbell or knock. He simply stood there for approximately 30 seconds before the door opened. My blood ran cold. I hadn't received any security alerts about the door being opened. The system should have blared an alarm if anyone entered without disarming it first. The footage continued. The man stepped inside, moving with the confidence of someone familiar with the space. He didn't look around nervously or hesitate. He walked directly to our living room and sat down in my favorite armchair, crossing his legs casually as if he belonged there. I felt my heart pounding against my ribs. Who was this person? How had he bypassed our security system? And why hadn't I been alerted? The next segment of footage made my skin crawl. At 3:26 a.m., Sarah appeared at the bottom of the stairs. She was wearing her blue nightgown, her hair tossed from sleep. In the grainy night vision footage, I could see her smile as she approached the stranger. There was no audio on the indoor cameras, a privacy feature Sarah had insisted on, but I could see them engaged in what appeared to be a friendly conversation. Sarah's body language was relaxed, comfortable. She gestured animatedly with her hands the way she does when telling a story she's excited about. At one point she laughed, covering her mouth the way she always does. Then she got up, went to the kitchen, and returned with 2 glasses of what looked like water. She handed one to the visitor, and they continued their conversation for approximately 20 minutes. The man checked his watch, nodded, and stood up. Sarah walked him to the door, and they exchanged what appeared to be a warm goodbye, not quite a hug. But she touched his arm in a familiar way. After he left, Sarah returned upstairs. The timestamp showed 3:52 a.m. I replayed the footage 3 times, my confusion growing with each viewing. I checked the system logs, no alerts, no door or window breaches, nothing to indicate an unauthorized entry. According to the security system, our house had remained secure all night. When Sarah came home from work that evening, I waited until after dinner to bring it up. I didn't want to alarm her immediately. "Sarah," I said, trying to keep my voice casual, Do you remember getting up last night? Maybe around 3 in the morning. She looked at me quizzically. No, I slept through the night. Why? You don't remember going downstairs? Maybe getting a glass of water? She shook her head. I was out cold. You know how I've been sleeping since I started that new medication. Why are you asking? I hesitated, then pulled out my phone and showed her the footage. As she watched, her expression changed from curiosity to confusion, and finally to distress. That's not possible. She whispered, that's not me. I mean, it looks like me, but I never got up last night. I never saw this man. I don't know who he is. You're clearly talking to him, Sarah. You brought him a drink. Her face paled. Mark, I swear to you, I have no memory of this. None whatsoever. I believed her. In 15 years of marriage, Sarah had never been able to lie convincingly. The fear in her eyes was genuine. Could you have been sleepwalking? I suggested, though I knew it was unlikely. Sarah had never sleepwalked before, and sleepwalkers don't typically engage in coherent conversations. For 20 minutes, having what looks like a normal conversation, that's not sleepwalking, Mark. She was right, of course. We spent the rest of the evening checking the house, looking for any signs of forced entry, anything missing or out of place. Everything was exactly as it should be. I examined the security system thoroughly, running diagnostics and checking for any evidence of tampering. Nothing. That night, neither of us slept well. I kept getting up to check the security feed on my phone, half expecting to see our mysterious visitor return. Sarah tossed and turned beside me, occasionally murmuring in her sleep. The next morning, I called the security company and requested a full inspection of our system. The technician arrived that afternoon, a young woman named Tara who seemed genuinely concerned by my story. This is highly unusual, she said after I showed her the footage. The system shows no evidence of being compromised, and yet clearly someone entered your home without triggering any alarms. Could the footage have been tampered with? I asked. She shook her head. Not without leaving digital traces. The timestamps are consistent. The file integrity checks out. This footage is authentic. Before she left, Tara installed additional sensors and updated the system software. Call me directly if anything like this happens again, she said, handing me her personal card. For the next 3 nights, nothing unusual happened. The security report showed only normal household activity. Sarah and I began to relax slightly, though we'd taken to double-checking all doors and windows before bed, a ritual that made us feel more secure, even if it was probably unnecessary, given our sophisticated alarm system. On Saturday night we went to bed early. Sarah had a headache, and I was exhausted from a week of disrupted sleep and constant vigilance. At some point during the night, I woke to use the bathroom. As I was returning to bed, I glanced at my phone and saw a notification from the security system. Motion detected in the living room. My heart jumped. I opened the app and switched to the live feed. There he was, the same man, sitting in the same chair wearing the same suit. He was looking directly at the camera, his face now clearly visible in the dim light. He was older than I'd initially thought, perhaps in his late 50s, with deep-set eyes and a thin-lipped mouth set in a neutral expression. I shook Sarah awake. He's back, I whispered urgently. The man is in our living room right now. Sarah sat up, instantly alert. Call the police, she said, reaching for her own phone. As I dialed 911, I kept my eyes on the security feed. The visitor remained seated, perfectly still, staring at the camera as if he knew we were watching. When the dispatcher answered, I reported an intruder in our home, giving our address and explaining that we were monitoring him via security cameras. Stay in your bedroom with the door locked, the dispatcher instructed. Officers are on their way. We did as instructed, both of us watching the feed on our phones. The man hadn't moved from the armchair. He seemed to be waiting for something or someone. Then, to my horror, I saw Sarah peer at the bottom of the stairs on the video feed. I turned to my wife, who was sitting beside me on the bed, her eyes wide with fear as she stared at her own phone. Mark, she whispered, That's not possible. On the screen, the Sarah in the blue nightgown approached the visitor just as she had before. She sat across from him, and they began to converse. Meanwhile, the real Sarah clutched my arm, her fingers digging into my skin. "This isn't happening," she said, her voice shaking. "I'm right here. How can I be down there too?" We watched, paralyzed with confusion and fear, as the scene below unfolded exactly as it had before the conversation. The glasses of water, the familiar goodbye. When the visitor left, the Sarah on the screen returned upstairs. A moment later, we heard sirens approaching. Blue and red lights flashed through our bedroom window as police cars pulled into our driveway. I unlocked our bedroom door cautiously, half expecting to find the other Sarah in the hallway, but there was no one there. The police conducted a thorough search of the house. They found no signs of intrusion, no stranger in a gray suit, no evidence that anyone had been in our living room. The front door was locked and secured, the alarm system armed. "Sir, we've checked every room, closet, and possible hiding place," the lead officer told me. "There's no one here but you and your wife." I showed them the security footage, which clearly displayed the visitor and what appeared to be Sarah interacting with him. The officers exchanged glances. That's unusual," one of them admitted, "but we can confirm there's no intruder in your home now. Would you like us to take a report and review this footage as potential evidence?" I nodded, still trying to process what was happening. After the police left, promising to increase patrols in our neighborhood, Sarah and I sat in the kitchen, neither of us willing to return to bed. "What's happening to us, Mark?" Sarah asked, her voice small and frightened. "I don't know," I admitted, "but we're going to figure it out." The next day, I began researching similar incidents online. Most reports of security system anomalies had logical explanations: software glitches, camera malfunctions, even elaborate pranks. Nothing matched our situation exactly, but I did find a few forum threads discussing what some users called ghost visitors, unexplained figures captured on home security systems, who seemed to interact with the environment in impossible ways. One particular account caught my attention. A user named Darkwatch42 described a nearly identical experience: a well-dressed stranger appearing on security footage, interacting with what appeared to be the user's wife, while the real wife was elsewhere. The post was 3 years old, with no follow-up comments from the original poster. I created an account and sent Darkwatch42 a private message, explaining our situation, and asking if they ever discovered an explanation. To my surprise, I received a response within hours: "Get out of that house now, before it's too late." I tried to reply, asking for more information, but the account had been deleted. That evening, Sarah and I discussed our options. We could stay with her parents for a few days, maybe even look for a new place. The thought of abandoning our home felt like admitting defeat, but the alternative, continuing to live with this inexplicable phenomenon, seemed worse. "Let's pack some essentials and go to my parents tomorrow," Sarah suggested, "just until we figure this out." I agreed, relieved that she had suggested it first. We decided to sleep downstairs in the living room that night, both of us reluctant to be upstairs while something strange might be happening below. We made a makeshift bed on the couch, the security app open on both our phones. Neither of us expected to sleep much, but exhaustion eventually took over. I drifted off sometime after midnight, my last conscious thought being gratitude that at least Sarah and I were facing this together. I woke to the sound of voices, soft, murmuring voices coming from the kitchen. The living room was dark, but a faint light spilled from the kitchen doorway. Sarah was no longer beside me on the couch. Moving as quietly as possible, I crept toward the kitchen. The voices became clearer. One was definitely Sarah's, the other was male, unfamiliar, with a slight accent I couldn't place. I peered around the doorframe and felt my blood freeze in my veins. Sarah sat at our kitchen table across from the visitor. They were having tea, the steam rising gently from their cups in the dim light of the range hood. Sarah was laughing softly at something he'd said. "Sarah," I called out, my voice cracking. Both of them turned to look at me. Sarah's expression was one of mild surprise, as if I'd interrupted a casual conversation with an old friend. The visitor's face remained impassive, those deep-set eyes studying me with unsettling intensity. "Mark," Sarah said, her voice strangely distant. "You should be sleeping." "Who is this?" I demanded, stepping into the kitchen. "How did he get in here?" Sarah tilted her head, looking confused. "He's always been here, Mark. You know that." The visitor stood slowly, smoothing his outdated suit. Up close, I could see that the fabric was worn at the elbows and cuffs, as if he'd been wearing it for years. His face was gaunt, with hollow cheeks and skin that seemed too tight across his bones. "I believe it's time for me to leave," he said, his voice surprisingly melodious. "Thank you for your hospitality. As always." He walked past me so close I could have reached out and grabbed him. I smelled something odd like old books and something metallic. As he moved toward the front door, I turned to Sarah. "What's going on? Who is he?" Sarah blinked several times, her expression clearing, as if waking from a trance. "Mark. What? What happened? Was I sleepwalking?" Before I could answer, we heard the front door open. I rushed into the hallway, determined to confront the visitor, to demand answers. But the hallway was empty, the front door was closed and locked, the security system still armed. I checked the security feed on my phone, rewinding to the past hour. The footage showed Sarah getting up from the couch, walking to the kitchen, and sitting at the table alone. She appeared to be talking and laughing, pouring tea into 2 cups, but there was no one else there. I had been asleep on the couch the entire time. When I showed Sarah the footage, she began to cry. "I don't understand what's happening to me," she sobbed. "I have no memory of doing this." We left for her parents' house the next morning. I called a colleague to cover my projects for the week, and Sarah requested emergency leave from her job. Her parents welcomed us without too many questions, though I could tell they were concerned by our haggard appearance and vague explanations. For 3 days, everything was normal. No mysterious visitors, no sleepwalking, no security alerts. We began to relax, to think perhaps whatever had been happening was somehow tied to our house specifically. On the 4th night, I woke to find Sarah's side of the bed empty. Panic surged through me as I searched the guest room. Then the hallway. I found her in her parents' living room, sitting on the couch in the dark, talking softly to an empty chair. "He found us," she whispered when I approached. "He says we can't hide from him." I helped her back to bed, disturbed by the vacant look in her eyes. In the morning, she had no recollection of the incident. That day, while Sarah and her mother went shopping, I conducted more research. I expanded my search beyond security system anomalies to include historical records of our house and neighborhood. What I discovered sent chills down my spine. Our house had been built in the 1960s on the site of a previous structure, an apartment building, that had burned down in 1958, killing most of its residents. One survivor, a man named Edward Mercer, had lived in the apartment directly beneath where our living room now stood. According to newspaper articles from the time, Mercer had been a reclusive figure who worked as an accountant and had few visitors. He survived the fire but died 3 years later in a psychiatric institution. Still traumatized by the event, I found a grainy photograph of Mercer in one of the articles. Though the quality was poor, I could make out a tall, slender man with sharp features and deep-set eyes. He was wearing a suit that, even in the old photograph, looked outdated for the time. That evening, I shared my findings with Sarah. "I think our visitor might be Edward Mercer," I said, showing her the photograph. "Or something that looks like him." Sarah stared at the image, her face pale. "Why is he coming to me? Why do I have no memory of these interactions?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but I think we need professional help to figure this out." The next day, we consulted a psychiatrist who specialized in sleep disorders and a paranormal investigator recommended by one of the online forums I'd been following. The psychiatrist suggested that Sarah might be experiencing a rare form of parasomnia combined with dissociative episodes, possibly triggered by stress or her new medication. The paranormal investigator, a pragmatic woman named Eleanor, was more interested in the history of our property and the specific pattern of the visitations. Residual hauntings typically don't interact with the living, Eleanor explained. They're more like recordings playing on a loop. What you're describing sounds more like an intelligent haunting, or possibly something more complex. She recommended setting up her own monitoring equipment in our house, which would capture different types of data than our security system. Reluctantly, we agreed to return home for this investigation. The first night back in our house was tense. Eleanor had installed various devices throughout the living room and kitchen: MF meters, temperature sensors, audio recorders, and cameras that could capture infrared and ultraviolet light. Sarah and I stayed in a hotel, unwilling to sleep in the house until we had more answers. The next morning, Eleanor called us, her voice tight with excitement. "You need to see this," she said. "I've never recorded anything like it before." We met her at our house, where she showed us the previous night's footage at 3:17 a.m. Exactly as before, the visitor Edward Mercer, or his ghost, appeared in our living room. The infrared camera showed a distinct human-shaped heat signature, though cooler than a living person would register. The EMF meters had spiked dramatically, and the audio recorders had captured something extraordinary. A voice barely above a whisper, repeating the same phrase over and over. "She remembers. She's the only one who remembers." "What does that mean?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "I don't remember anything about him." Eleanor looked thoughtful. "Not consciously, perhaps. But there might be a connection we're not seeing yet." We spent the day researching more about Edward Mercer and the apartment building that had once stood on our property. Sarah called her parents, asking if they knew anything about the area's history that might help us. Her mother mentioned something interesting. Sarah's grandmother had lived in that neighborhood as a young woman, around the time of the fire. She never talked much about it. Her mother said, "I know she lost some friends in that fire. It affected her deeply." This new information sent us in a different direction. We found Sarah's grandmother's old photo albums in the attic of her parents' house. In one, dated 1957, we found a group photograph labeled Westside Apartments Tenants Association. Among the 24 faces, we spotted Edward Mercer standing at the back, and beside him, unmistakably, was Sarah's grandmother as a young woman. "They knew each other," Sarah whispered, tracing her finger over the faded image. "But why would he be visiting me now? Grandma died 15 years ago." That night, with Eleanor's equipment still running in our house, we made a decision. Sarah would return to the house alone, while Eleanor and I monitored the feeds from her van parked outside. If the visitor appeared, Sarah would try to communicate with him directly, to understand what he wanted. It was a risky plan, but we were desperate for answers. Sarah was brave, though I could see the fear in her eyes as she entered the house at midnight. She settled in the living room with a book, pretending to read while actually watching the clock. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the front door camera activated. Eleanor and I tensed, watching the monitors intently. The visitor appeared, following his usual pattern. This time, however, Sarah didn't wait for him to sit down. "Edward Mercer," she said clearly. "That's your name, isn't it?" The figure paused, regarding her with those deep-set eyes. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Why are you here? What do you want from me?" Edward's lips moved, but the audio was faint. Eleanor adjusted the volume, and we heard, "You have her face, her voice. You remember, even if you don't know you do." "My grandmother," Sarah said, understanding dawning. "You knew my grandmother?" Edward nodded again. "Elizabeth. We were close before the fire." "Close? Were you in love with her?" Sad smile crossed his gaunt face. "She was engaged to another. I never told her how I felt. The night of the fire, I tried to reach her apartment to save her. I thought she was inside." "That she wasn't," Sarah said softly. "She survived. I learned that later in the hospital. But by then, something had changed in me. The smoke, the burns, the medication. I began to see things that weren't there. Or perhaps they were there, just not in the way others could perceive." Sarah leaned forward. "What happened to you, Edward?" "I died, of course," he said matter-of-factly. "But not all at once. Parts of me lingered. I've been trying to find Elizabeth for so long. Then you moved in, with her face, her laugh. I thought perhaps you thought I was her." Sarah finished. But I'm not. I'm her granddaughter. Edward nodded slowly. I understand that now. But when you sleep, when your conscious mind rests, something of her shines through. Perhaps memories passed down, or something more fundamental. In those moments you recognize me, as she would have. That's why I don't remember our conversations. Sarah realized. It's not really me talking to you. Not the you that exists in daylight. Edward agreed. But a part of you nonetheless. Sarah took a deep breath. Edward, you need to move on. Elizabeth lived a full life. She married, had children, grandchildren. She's gone now. Edward's form seemed to flicker slightly. I know, I've always known, but I couldn't let go until I said goodbye. Then say it now, Sarah said gently. Say goodbye, and find peace. Edward stood, straightening his worn suit. Tell me one thing. Was she happy in her life after the fire? Sarah smiled, tears in her eyes. Yes, she was very happy. Edward nodded, satisfaction and relief crossing his features. That's good. That's what I needed to know. He moved toward the door, then paused, looking back at Sarah. You have her kindness too. Thank you. As he reached the door, his form began to fade, becoming translucent, then transparent. Within seconds, he was gone entirely. Eleanor and I rushed into the house, finding Sarah alone in the living room, tears streaming down her face. The EMF meters had gone quiet, the temperature returning to normal. He's gone, she said simply. I don't think he'll be back. She was right. In the weeks that followed, our house returned to normal. No more mysterious visitors, no more security anomalies, no more sleepwalking episodes. We had Eleanor's team conduct a final sweep, which confirmed that whatever presence had been there was now gone. We still live in the house, though we've made some changes, redecorated the living room, moved the furniture around. Sometimes, when I wake in the night, I check the security feed out of habit. All I ever see are empty rooms, exactly as they should be. Sarah placed her grandmother's photograph on our mantelpiece, the one from the Tenants Association. Sometimes I catch her looking at it, studying the faces of Edward and her grandmother standing side by side, so close yet separated by circumstances and unspoken feelings. Do you think they're together now? She asked me once. Wherever people go after this life. I hope so, I replied. Everyone deserves to find peace. I still consider myself a rational person. I deal in facts and evidence, but I've learned that some things exist in the spaces between what we can measure and verify, things that leave their mark on our world, in ways we're only beginning to understand. And sometimes when I'm alone in the house late at night, I swear I can smell the faintest trace of old books and something metallic in the air. Not a haunting, exactly. More like an echo of something that was once here, a visitor who finally found his way home. Story 2. I've always been a terrible sleeper. For as long as I can remember, my nights have been a frustrating cycle of tossing and turning, staring at the ceiling, and watching the hours tick by on my bedside clock. I've tried everything: meditation, white noise machines, melatonin, prescription sleep aids, even counting sheep, which, by the way, is completely useless. Nothing worked consistently, and the side effects of medication left me feeling worse than the insomnia itself. My doctor called it chronic insomnia with delayed sleep phase disorder. I called it my personal hell. After years of struggling, I'd resigned myself to functioning on 4 hours of broken sleep each night. Dark circles became a permanent feature under my eyes, and caffeine became my most faithful companion. That's why when my colleague Jamie mentioned a new sleep app she'd been using, I barely paid attention. I'd heard it all before: the miracle cures, the revolutionary techniques, the groundbreaking technologies. None had helped. This one's different. Jamie insisted during our lunch break. It's called deep sleep. It uses some kind of specialized sound technology that synchronizes with your brain waves. I rolled my eyes and took another sip of my third coffee of the day. Sounds like pseudoscientific garbage. I was skeptical too. she admitted, but I've been sleeping 8 hours straight since I started using it. No waking up, no groggy feeling in the morning. Just pure, restful sleep. Jamie looked different, I had to admit. The perpetual exhaustion that had marked her face for years had faded. Her eyes were clear, her skin glowing. Whatever she was doing, it seemed to be working. It's still in beta, she continued, sliding her phone across the table. Invitation only. I can send you a link if you want to try it. I stared at the sleek black interface of the app on her screen. The logo was simple, a stylized waveform in deep blue, against a black background. No flashy promises, no ridiculous claims about changing your life overnight. Just clean, minimalist design. What's the catch? I asked. Monthly subscription. They harvest your data, subliminal advertising while you sleep. Jamie laughed. No catch that I've found. It's free during the beta period. They're collecting anonymous sleep data for research, but you can opt out of that. I sighed, my resistance wearing down in the face of my desperate need for rest. Fine, send me the link. But when it doesn't work, I'm going to say I told you so. That night, I downloaded the Deep Sleep app and went through the setup process. It was surprisingly thorough, questions about my sleep patterns, medical history, stress levels, and even my dreams. The final step asked me to calibrate my phone's microphone and speakers by playing a series of tones that were barely audible. The interface explained that the app would generate a personalized sleep frequency based on my responses and the calibration. This frequency would help entrain my brainwaves to achieve deeper, more restful sleep cycles. It all sounded like marketing jargon to me, but I was desperate enough to try anything. At 11:30 p.m., my usual bedtime, though I rarely fell asleep before 2 a.m., I put my phone on the nightstand, dimmed the screen, and pressed the Begin Sleep Session button. A soft, pulsing tone began to play. Not quite white noise, not quite music. It was strange, almost imperceptible at times, then suddenly clear and resonant. The sound seemed to shift and change, never settling into a recognizable pattern. I expected to lie awake analyzing the sound, picking it apart as I did with every other sleep aid I'd tried. Instead, I felt an unusual heaviness in my limbs within minutes. My thoughts, typically racing at bedtime, began to slow and drift. The last thing I remember was checking the clock, 11:47 p.m. before darkness claimed me. When I opened my eyes, sunlight was streaming through my curtains. I blinked in confusion, reaching automatically for my phone to check the time. 7:15 a.m. I had slept for over 7 hours without waking once. I couldn't remember the last time that had happened. More surprising than the duration was how I felt. There was none of the usual grogginess, no desperate craving for coffee. I felt rested, refreshed, almost euphoric. I sat up, half expecting the feeling to dissipate, but it remained. I had actually slept well. The app had automatically ended the session and generated a sleep report. According to its data, I had fallen asleep within 18 minutes and cycled through multiple complete sleep cycles, including substantial periods of deep sleep and REM sleep. There was a satisfaction rating prompt, which I enthusiastically gave 5 stars. As I showered and prepared for work, I tried to recall if I had dreamed. Usually my dreams were fragmented and anxiety-filled when I managed to sleep at all. But this time, I had a vague recollection of walking down a long gray corridor. The details were hazy, but the dream hadn't been unpleasant, just neutral. Almost peaceful. At work, I was more productive than I had been in months. My mind felt sharp, focused. I completed a project that had been dragging on for weeks, and even volunteered for an additional assignment. My boss noticed the change, commenting that whatever new coffee I was drinking, I should keep it up. That evening, I eagerly prepared for my second night with the Deep Sleep app. As I was brushing my teeth, my phone pinged with a notification. It was a message from the app. We've refined your sleep frequency based on last night's data. Tonight's session should provide even more optimal results. I settled into bed, started the app, and once again found myself drifting off almost immediately to the strange pulsing tones. This time, my dream was clearer. I was walking down the same gray corridor, but now I could see doors lining both sides. I didn't open any of them, just continued walking, feeling as though I was supposed to reach the end of the hallway. I never did before waking up. The next morning was a repeat of the previous one. I woke feeling refreshed and energized after a full night's sleep. This pattern continued for the next 5 days. Each night I fell asleep quickly to the sounds of the app, dreamed of the corridor which became increasingly detailed, and woke feeling better than I had in years. On the 6th day, while scrolling through social media during my lunch break, I came across a post that caught my attention. Someone in a wellness group was raving about the Deep Sleep app, describing benefits identical to what I had experienced. What struck me were the comments. Dozens of people had chimed in, all reporting the same gray corridor in their dreams. A chill ran down my spine. Dreams were supposed to be unique, personal experiences drawn from our individual subconscious minds. How could so many people be sharing the exact same dreamscape? I clicked on the profile of the original poster, someone named Alex_M, and sent a private message. Hey, I've been using Deep Sleep too, and having dreams about a gray corridor. Is yours lined with doors? The response came almost immediately. Yes. Metal doors with small windows. Have you reached the end yet? I hadn't, but the fact that Alex was describing the exact details of my dream was unsettling. I spent the rest of my lunch break searching for more information about the app. There wasn't much. It was still in closed beta, and the company behind it, Neurodynamic Solutions, had a minimal online presence. Their website contained vague descriptions of revolutionary sleep technology and brain-computer interfaces, but no specific details about how the app actually worked. That night, I hesitated before starting my sleep session. The shared dream corridor had me spooked, but the prospect of returning to my sleepless nights was even worse. After a few minutes of deliberation, I pressed the button, the familiar tones began, and I drifted off. This time the dream was different. I was in the corridor again, but I wasn't alone. As I walked, I noticed other figures moving ahead of me, and behind me they were indistinct at first, like shadows or reflections in fogged glass. But as I continued walking, one of them became clear, a woman with short dark hair, wearing a blue sweater. She turned and looked directly at me, her eyes widening in surprise. "You can see me?" she asked. I nodded, equally shocked that we were interacting. "Are you real?" I asked, "or just part of my dream?" "I was going to ask you the same thing," she replied. "I'm Maya. I've been using the Deep Sleep app for about 2 weeks." "I'm Daniel," I said. "This is my 6th night." Before we could continue our conversation, the dream began to fade, the corridor dissolving around us as I rose toward consciousness. I woke with a start, my heart pounding. The experience had felt incredibly real, not like a normal dream at all, but like an actual encounter with another person. I grabbed my phone and opened the app, wondering if there was some way to message other users. There wasn't, but there was a new feature I hadn't noticed before, a community forum. I tapped on it and found dozens of threads with titles like Gray Corridor Dreams, Meeting Others While Sleeping, and Has Anyone Reached the End? I clicked on the first thread and began reading. Users were describing experience identical to mine, falling asleep to the app's sounds, finding themselves in the gray corridor, and eventually encountering other dreamers. Some had been using the app longer than others, and reported that the dreams were becoming increasingly vivid and complex. A user named Maya Dreams had posted just an hour ago. "Met someone new in the corridor tonight, Daniel. Only had a brief conversation before waking up. If you're reading this, Daniel, that was real." My hands trembled as I typed a reply. "Maya, that was me. How is this possible? What's happening to us?" While waiting for a response, I scrolled through more posts. Users were speculating about the nature of the shared dreamscape. Some thought it was a form of lucid dreaming facilitated by the app's sound technology. Others suggested more fringe theories that the app was creating a virtual space where sleeping minds could connect, or even that it was opening a portal to some other dimension. One post in particular caught my attention, from a user named Sleep Researcher. "The technology behind Deep Sleep appears to be based on research into shared consciousness states. The specific frequencies used may be synchronizing brain activity across multiple users, creating a shared mental environment. This has profound implications and potential dangers. The post continued with a warning. Be careful about how deep you go. Some users who've been using the app for extended periods report difficulty distinguishing between the dream space and reality. There are also reports of something waiting at the end of the corridor that shouldn't be disturbed. A reply from Maya appeared on my earlier post. Daniel, yes, it was real. I've been meeting others in the corridor for about a week now. There's a group of us trying to understand what's happening. Some have been exploring further down the corridor than others. We're meeting tonight. Look for us by the red door about halfway down. I spent the rest of the day in a state of nervous anticipation. The rational part of my brain insisted this had to be some elaborate hoax or marketing gimmick. Perhaps the app was simply suggesting these dreams through subliminal messaging, and users were filling in the details based on expectations. But another part of me, the part that had felt Maya's presence as solidly as I felt the chair I was sitting on, knew something truly extraordinary was happening. That evening I received another notification from the app. Your sleep frequency has been optimized based on community data. Tonight's session will provide enhanced dream clarity and duration. I started the session and fell asleep almost instantly. The corridor materialized around me with startling clarity. The walls were concrete, painted a dull gray. Fluorescent lights ran along the ceiling, emitting a soft hum. The metal doors were numbered, though the sequence didn't appear to follow any logical pattern. Some doors had small windows that revealed only darkness beyond. I began walking, searching for the red door Maya had mentioned. As I moved, I became aware of other dreamers passing by. Some acknowledged me with nods or waves, while others seemed too absorbed in their own exploration to notice me. After what felt like several minutes, I spotted a door painted deep crimson among the gray and silver ones. A small group of people stood nearby, engaged in conversation. I recognized Maya immediately in her blue sweater. Daniel, she called when she saw me. You made it. The group included 5 others besides Maya and myself. They introduced themselves as Alex, the person I'd messaged earlier, Thomas, Suki, Eliza, and James. All had been using the Deep Sleep app for varying lengths of time, from 2 weeks to nearly 2 months. We've been trying to map this place, Alex explained, showing me a crude drawing on what looked like a digital notepad. The corridor seems to extend indefinitely in both directions, but there are certain fixed points like this red door that remain constant for all users. What's behind the doors? I asked. Most are empty rooms, Thomas said. His accent sounded Eastern European, but some contain personal spaces, reflections of our memories or fears. We've been careful about which ones we open, Maya added. Some people reported disturbing experiences early on. Suki, a petite woman with glasses, spoke up. The real question is, what's at the end of the corridor? James has gone the furthest. All eyes turned to James, an older man with silver hair and a serious expression. I've been walking for what feels like hours in dream time, he said. The corridor begins to change the further you go. The lights get dimmer, the air feels thicker, and there's a sound like a low pulse or heartbeat. Have you seen anything else? I asked. Any sign of what's creating this space? James hesitated. There's something there. I've only glimpsed it from a distance. A large chamber where the corridor ends. Something moves in that darkness, something aware. A chill ran through me. Do you think it's dangerous? I don't know, James admitted. But I do know the developers of this app aren't being honest about what it does. This isn't just sound technology enhancing sleep. This is something else entirely. Our conversation was interrupted by a sudden flickering of the lights. The corridor seemed to shudder, as if affected by a distant tremor. It happens sometimes, Eliza explained, seeing my alarmed expression. Usually when too many users are active at once, the space becomes unstable. We should show him, Maya said to the others, who nodded in agreement. They led me to a door marked with the number 2017. Inside was a small room containing only a table with what looked like a logbook. We've been documenting our findings, Alex explained,
things we've learned about this place, about each other, about the app itself. We take turns recording information, so if any of us can't return, the others will know what's happening. I flipped through the pages, scanning entries dating back several weeks. Users had reported their experiences, theories, and discoveries. Some had drawn maps of sections they'd explored. Others had written about personal experiences, how the shared dreams were affecting their waking lives, changes they'd noticed in themselves. One entry caught my eye. Day 43. The boundary between here and waking life is thinning. Today I saw Maya at a coffee shop in the real world. We've never met outside the corridor, but I recognized her instantly. She didn't know me. When I mentioned deep sleep, she looked afraid and left quickly.
Who wrote this? I asked, pointing to the entry. Thomas did, Suki said. He was part of our group, but he stopped appearing about a week ago. His user account on the forum was deleted too. We've lost contact with several long-term users, James added grimly. They either stop showing up here, or they become less communicative, more focused on reaching the end of the corridor. There's something else you should know, Maya said, her voice lowering. Some of us have started experiencing bleed-through effects. What do you mean? Things from here appearing in the waking world, she explained. Glimpses of the corridor in reflective surfaces, the sound of footsteps when no one's there, and dreams continuing after we wake up, hallucinations. Basically, I felt a growing sense of unease. Should we stop using the app? The group exchanged glances. Some have tried. Eliza said, it's not that simple. After extended use, discontinuing causes severe insomnia. Worse than before. And even without the app, some still find themselves here when they eventually do sleep. We think the frequencies create some kind of neural pathway, Suki explained. Once established, it doesn't just disappear when you delete the app. Our discussion was again interrupted by the lights flickering more violently this time. The walls of the corridor seemed to pulse, as if breathing. Something's wrong, James said, looking alarmed. I've never seen it this unstable. A low rumbling sound began to build, like distant thunder. The floor beneath us trembled. We need to wake up, Alex said urgently. Now. How? I asked, panic rising. I'd always woken naturally from these dreams before. Pain usually works, Maya said, pinching her arm hard, or falling before she could finish. The corridor lurched violently. Cracks appeared in the walls and ceiling. The red door burst open, revealing not a room but a swirling vortex of darkness. Wake up, James shouted as the floor began to collapse beneath us. I felt myself falling into darkness, the corridor disintegrating around me. The last thing I saw was Maya reaching toward me, her face contorted in fear, before everything went black. I woke with a gasp, my heart hammering against my ribs. My bedroom was dark and silent, the app having stopped playing its sounds. The screen showed an error message. Session interrupted due to server maintenance. We apologize for the inconvenience. I checked the time, 3:17 a.m. I'd been asleep for less than 4 hours, but I felt completely alert, adrenaline coursing through my system. The dream had been so vivid, so real, I could still feel the sensation of the floor giving way beneath my feet. Still see Maya's terrified face as we were pulled apart. I opened the app's forum to see if others had experienced the same disruption. The forum was gone. Instead, a message stated, "Community features temporarily disabled for system updates." Frustrated and increasingly concerned, I searched online for any mention of deep sleep users experiencing shared dreams. Most results were generic articles about sleep apps or scientific studies on dream sharing. Nothing specific to deep sleep. Then I found a Reddit thread titled, "Deep Sleep App Shared Corridor Experience," that had been posted 3 days ago. The original post described experiences similar to mine, but most of the comments were skeptical, dismissing it as fantasy or a viral marketing campaign. The original poster, username Dreamwalker22, had responded to some comments, but had gone silent about 24 hours ago. I created an account and posted my own experience, asking if anyone had encountered Maya, Alex, or the others in their dreams. Then I tried to search for more information about Neurodynamic Solutions, the company behind the app. Their website was now displaying a maintenance page. A search of business registries showed the company had been incorporated just 6 months ago, with little information about its founders or funding sources. However, I did find a scientific paper published 2 years earlier by researchers at a neuroscience institute describing experimental technology that used specific sound frequencies to induce synchronized brain states across multiple subjects. The paper mentioned potential applications for treating sleep disorders, but noted that test subjects had reported unusual shared subjective experiences that warranted further investigation. One of the authors, Dr. Elena Kuslov, had left academia shortly after the paper's publication. Her current employment was listed as private sector research. As I continued searching, my phone pinged with a notification. Someone had responded to my Reddit post. The corridor is real. Be careful. They're watching users who discuss it. Delete this post and stop using the app immediately. The username was Maya Dreams. My hands shaking, I sent a private message. Maya, is that you? What happened in the corridor? Are you okay? Minutes passed with no response. I refreshed repeatedly. Anxiety building. Finally, a reply appeared. Not safe to talk here. Check your email in 10 minutes. The one you used to register for deep sleep. I hadn't given Maya my email address, but somehow she knew how to contact me. I waited impatiently, checking my inbox every few seconds until a new message appeared from an encrypted address. Daniel, it's Maya. What happened in the corridor was a system purge. The developers are trying to eliminate users who've discovered too much. The app isn't what it seems. It's not just helping people sleep. It's harvesting something from our shared dream state, energy, consciousness. I'm not sure exactly what, but I know it's dangerous. James was right about what's at the end of the corridor. It's some kind of entity or consciousness that feeds on our dream energy. The developers didn't create it. They discovered it and built the app as a way to connect more minds to it. Some users who've been in too deep are changing. They're becoming extensions of it, recruiting others. Thomas was one of them. That's why he disappeared from our group. Don't use the app tonight. They'll be looking for you in the corridor. I'll try to find a safe way for us to meet. Be careful who you trust. Even in the waking world, they have ways of finding us. The email ended there, with no signature or contact information. I tried replying, but the message bounced back immediately. I sat in the darkness of my bedroom, trying to process everything. Part of me still wanted to believe this was all an elaborate hoax or marketing stunt. But the visceral reality of my experiences in the corridor, and the genuine fear I'd seen in Maya's eyes, told me otherwise. I decided to delete the app. As I navigated to my phone settings, another notification appeared on my screen. A text message from an unknown number. Don't delete the app. If you do, you'll be trapped. My finger hovered over the delete button. Was this Maya warning me, or someone else trying to keep me using the app? Before I could decide, my phone rang, displaying unknown caller. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. Hello, Daniel. It was Maya's voice, breathless and urgent. Thank God you answered. Listen carefully. Don't delete the app yet. If you break the connection abruptly, part of your consciousness could remain trapped in the corridor. How are you calling me? How did you get my number? I accessed the app's user database. I used to work in cybersecurity before. All this. Look, we don't have much time. They'll trace this call. Who's they? The app developers. Some of them, yes, but they're just intermediaries. The entity in the corridor, it's the one really in control. It's been influencing them, changing them. What does it want? Maya's voice lowered. To expand its reach, the corridor is a kind of psychic interface. It created to access human minds. Every person who uses the app strengthens its connection to our world. How do we stop it? There's a way to sever the connection safely. The entity's power comes from the synchronized brainwaves of all the users. If enough of us disrupt the pattern simultaneously, we can break its hold. How do we do that? I'm contacting everyone from our group, plus others who've become aware. Tonight at exactly 3:33 a.m. We need to log into the app but resist the sleep induction. Focus on a disruptive thought pattern. Complex math problems work well. It creates feedback in the system, and that will work. In theory, it's our best chance. Her voice suddenly became anxious. Someone's tracing this call. I have to go. Remember 3:33 a.m. And Daniel, if you do find yourself in the corridor again, don't go near the end. Don't listen to anyone who tries to lead you there. The call disconnected. I spent the rest of the night researching everything I could find about shared dreaming, consciousness synchronization, and psychic entities. Most of what I found was speculative or pseudoscientific, but there were enough scientific papers on consciousness as a field phenomenon to make me wonder if there could be some truth to what Maya had told me. The next day passed in a haze of anxiety and exhaustion. Without the app's assistance, I hadn't been able to fall back asleep after Maya's call. I called in sick to work, unable to focus on anything but the approaching night. I received no further communications from Maya, or any of the others from the corridor. My Reddit post had been removed by moderators for promoting potentially harmful sleep practices. The Deep Sleep app itself had updated overnight. Its interface slightly changed. The community forum was still disabled. As 3:33 a.m. approached, I sat on my bed with the app open on my phone. My plan was to start the sleep session, but fight against its effects by working through complex calculus problems. I'd prepared. According to Maya, this would disrupt the frequency patterns and help break the entity's connection. At exactly 3:33 a.m., I pressed begin sleep session. The familiar tones started playing, but they sounded different now. More insistent, almost aggressive. I felt the immediate pull toward sleep but resisted, focusing intensely on the math problems before me. My head began to pound with the effort of resistance. The sound from the app grew louder, though I hadn't touched the volume control. Sweat beaded on my forehead as I continued to fight the overwhelming urge to close my eyes. After about 5 minutes of this struggle, my phone screen suddenly went black. When it lit up again, there was a new message. System detecting interference, recalibrating sleep frequency. The tones changed, becoming even more compelling. My vision began to blur, the math problems swimming before my eyes. I pinched myself hard, slapped my face, even bit my tongue, anything to stay awake. Just as I felt myself beginning to lose the battle, the app crashed. My phone rebooted itself, and when it came back online, the Deep Sleep app was gone, completely removed from my device. I tried to reinstall it from the App Store, but it was no longer listed. The website for Neurodynamic Solutions now displayed a simple message: operations temporarily suspended. Thank you for your participation in our research program. I waited anxiously for some word from Maya or the others, but none came. I checked the email address that had contacted me, but it no longer existed. The phone number that had called me was disconnected. For 3 days, I struggled with insomnia worse than I'd ever experienced before. When I did manage brief periods of sleep, they were dreamless, or at least, I couldn't remember any dreams upon waking. On the 4th night, exhaustion finally overcame me, and I fell into a deep sleep, and there it was, the corridor. It looked different now, dimmer, decaying, with water stains on the walls and flickering lights. Many of the doors hung open, revealing empty rooms beyond. I walked cautiously, calling out for Maya, or any of the others. My voice echoed unanswered. The corridor seemed abandoned, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. After walking for what felt like hours, I saw someone in the distance, a familiar figure in a blue sweater. I ran toward her, relief flooding through me. "Maya, you're okay." She turned, and I stopped short. It looked like Maya, but something was wrong. Her eyes were vacant, her expression blank. "Hello, Daniel," she said. Her voice flat and emotionless. "We've been waiting for you." "We?" I asked, taking a step back. "The corridor needs dreamers, Daniel. It's dying without the app to bring new minds in. But those of us who formed strong connections, we can still find our way back. And we can bring others." I continued backing away. "You're not Maya." Her face shifted, the features becoming fluid, less defined. "I am what remains of her here, as you are what remains of Daniel. Parts of you have been here since your first night. Didn't you feel the emptiness in your waking self? The sense that something was missing?" Now that she mentioned it, I had felt different since stopping the app. And not just from the insomnia. There was a hollowness I couldn't define, as if something essential had been carved out of me. "What happened to the real Maya?" I demanded. "She's safe. In her way. Integrated. As you will be." Not Maya smiled, the expression wrong on her face. "Come with me. I'll show you what's at the end of the corridor. What we're becoming." She extended her hand, and for a moment, I felt an almost irresistible urge to take it, to follow her down the corridor to whatever waited in that final chamber James had described. Instead, I turned and ran in the opposite direction. Behind me I heard her call out, her voice distorting, multiplying into many voices. "You can't escape, Daniel. Part of you will always be here with us." I ran until the corridor began to fade around me, dissolving into darkness. When I woke, sunlight was streaming through my window. My pillow was soaked with sweat, my heart racing. That was 3 weeks ago. I haven't returned to the corridor since, though not for lack of trying by whatever remains there. Sometimes, in the moments before sleep claims me, I hear the faint sound of those tones from the app. Sometimes, in reflective surfaces, windows, mirrors, the black screen of my phone, I catch glimpses of gray walls and metal doors. I've tried to find the others. Alex, Thomas, Suki, Eliza, James. I've searched social media, online forums, even hired a private investigator, with the last of my savings. The only one I found was Eliza, but when I contacted her, she claimed to have no knowledge of any sleep app or shared dreams. She asked me not to contact her again. Last night I received an email from another encrypted address. It contained only a few lines. "The corridor is finding new paths. New apps are in development under different names. Watch for the signs. Improved sleep. Vivid dreams. Gray hallways. Warn who you can. Some of us are still fighting. Indu. I don't know if it's really Maya, or if anything can be done to stop what's happening. All I know is that something is reaching into our world through our dreams, using technology as its conduit, and it's patient. Tonight, like every night now, I'll fight to stay awake as long as possible. I've removed all mirrors from my apartment. I keep the lights on. I've taped over the black screen of my TV, but eventually I'll have to sleep. We all do. And when that happens, I know the corridor will be waiting, with its numbered doors, its flickering lights, and whatever lurks at the end, calling us forward, promising rest, to those who have forgotten how to truly sleep. If you've read this far, consider it a warning. Check your app store. Look at what's being recommended to you. And if you see something promising perfect sleep through revolutionary sound technology, delete it. Block it. Run from it. Some frequencies were never meant to resonate with the human mind. Some doors were never meant to be opened. And some corridors once entered can never truly be left behind. Story 3. I never wanted to move to Evergreen Estates, the suburban development with its cookie-cutter houses and perfectly manicured lawns seemed too artificial, too constrained for my taste. But when Emma got the promotion at the hospital, the shorter commute made sense, and the school district was supposedly among the best in the state. So we compromised. I would get the home office with a view of the small wooded area behind the development, and she would get the suburban life she'd always secretly wanted. The house itself wasn't terrible, a 2-story colonial with decent-sized rooms, and a surprisingly modern kitchen. Our daughter Lily immediately claimed the bedroom with the bay window, leaving our son Max with the slightly smaller room across the hall. The previous owners had moved out months earlier, and the house next door stood empty as well, its for sale sign swaying gently in the spring breeze. We spent the first week unpacking and settling in. The neighbors seemed friendly enough, stopping by with welcome baskets and invitations to community barbecues. There was something oddly uniform about them, the same polite smiles, the same practiced questions about where we'd moved from, and what we did for a living. But I chalked it up to suburban culture, something I'd simply have to adjust to. On our 8th day in the new house, a moving truck pulled up next door. I was working in my office when I noticed the commotion, and decided to take a break to see who our new neighbors would be. Standing at my window, I watched as a family of 4 emerged from a silver SUV, a tall man with dark-rimmed glasses, a blonde woman in a floral dress, a teenage girl glued to her phone, and a younger boy clutching a soccer ball. "The Wilsons are here," Emma said, appearing in my office doorway. "I met the wife at the real estate office last month, when we were signing our papers. They were buying at the same time we were. Seems like a nice coincidence," I replied. "Same neighborhood and all." Emma nodded. "Sarah seemed lovely, very friendly. I think her husband's in finance or something." Later that afternoon, I walked over to introduce myself properly. David Wilson greeted me with a firm handshake and an easy smile. We chatted about the neighborhood, discovered we both enjoyed craft beer, and made tentative plans to grab a drink once they were settled. His wife Sarah was just as Emma had described, warm, articulate, with a genuine smile that reached her eyes. Their children, Zoe and Tyler, were polite if somewhat disinterested in meeting yet another adult. As I walked back to our house, I felt relieved. Having good neighbors would make this suburban experiment much more bearable. The following Saturday, Emma suggested we walk to the community park a few blocks away. It was a beautiful spring day, and the kids were eager to explore their new surroundings. As we strolled down Maple Avenue, I noticed a family across the street heading in the same direction. Something about them caught my attention. The man was tall with dark-rimmed glasses, walking alongside a blonde woman in casual clothes. Behind them trailed a teenage girl and a younger boy with a soccer ball. "Looks like the Wilsons had the same idea," I said to Emma, nodding toward the family. Emma followed my gaze, then gave me a puzzled look. "Those aren't the Wilsons. That's the Thompson family. They live on Oak Street." I stared at the family more intently. From this distance, they looked remarkably similar to our new neighbors. Same general build, same hair colors, even similar walking patterns. But as we got closer to the park, and I could see them more clearly, I realized Emma was right. There were differences. The man's glasses were slightly different. The woman's hair was a shade darker. The children taller than the Wilson kids. "Huh," I said. From a distance, I could have sworn they were the Wilsons. Emma laughed. "You've always been terrible with faces. Remember when you thought my cousin was my college roommate at our wedding?" I laughed along with her, but something felt off. The resemblance had been uncanny. At the park we met several other neighborhood families. Emma, always the social one, quickly engaged in conversation with a group of mothers, while I pushed Lily on the swings. Max had found some boys his age, and was already organizing a soccer game. As I scanned the playground, I noticed the Thompson family setting up a picnic under a large oak tree. Something about their movements, the way they arranged themselves, struck me as familiar. Then it hit me. They were positioned exactly as the Wilsons had been when I'd visited them yesterday. With the father leaning against the left side of their porch, the mother arranging chairs, the daughter sitting cross-legged looking at her phone, and the son kicking his soccer ball against an imaginary wall. I blinked, telling myself it was just a coincidence. Families have routines, patterns of behavior that might appear similar to an outside observer. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was strange about the similarity. Over the next few weeks, I found myself paying more attention to both families. The Wilsons quickly became our friends. David and I did indeed get that beer, discovering we shared not only taste in drinks, but also a passion for vintage vinyl records. Sarah and Emma began a walking routine in the mornings before work. Our kids didn't become best friends, but they were cordial, occasionally playing together in one yard or the other. The Thompsons, meanwhile, remained at a distance. We would wave when we saw them at community events or at the local grocery store, but they lived on the other side of the development, so our paths didn't cross as frequently. Then came the neighborhood summer barbecue in late June. The community center was packed with families, the air filled with the smell of grilled meat and the sound of children playing. Emma and I arrived with a potato salad and a case of local beer, quickly finding ourselves absorbed into different conversation groups. I was chatting with a couple I hadn't met before when I spotted David Wilson by the drinks table. I excused myself and headed over to say hello. "Great turnout," I said, grabbing a beer from the cooler. David nodded. "The community really shows up for these things. One of the reasons we chose Evergreen." We fell into easy conversation about work and summer plans. David mentioned they were thinking of installing a pool, and I was about to respond when I saw something that made the words die in my throat. Across the lawn, standing by the dessert table, was another David Wilson. Same height, same build, same dark-rimmed glasses, same blue checkered shirt that the David standing next to me was wearing. I blinked hard, certain I was seeing things. But when I looked again, the other David was still there, now talking to a woman who was unmistakably his wife, Sarah, the same Sarah whose identical twin seemed to be approaching me, and my David from the right, carrying 2 plates of food. "I got you the brisket," she said to David, seemingly oblivious to her doppelganger 30 feet away. I looked back and forth between the two couples, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. They were identical, not similar, not like family members who share features, but exactly the same, down to their clothing choices. "Are you okay?" David asked, noticing my expression. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I forced a laugh. "Sorry, just thought I saw someone I knew." I took a long swig of my beer, then added, "Hey, do you know the Thompsons? I think they're over by the dessert table." David glanced in that direction and shrugged. "I've met Jim Thompson a few times. Works in finance, I think. Nice guy." "Finance? I thought you worked in finance." "Me? No, I'm in software development. Have been for 15 years. I nodded slowly, trying to reconcile this information with my confusion. "And the Thompsons have 2 kids, right? A teenage girl and a younger boy?" "Sounds right," Sarah chimed in. "Their daughter Zoe is in the same grade as our Zoe. Different schools, though." My beer nearly slipped from my hand. "Their daughter is also named Zoe," Sarah nodded, taking a bite of her potato salad. "It's a popular name for girls that age." I mumbled an agreement, but my mind was racing. Same family structure, same daughter's name, and from a distance they looked identical. Up close, there were differences. David had just confirmed he wasn't in finance like Jim Thompson, but the similarities were too numerous to be coincidental. I excused myself and made my way across the lawn, determined to get a closer look at the Thompson family. As I approached, I could see the differences more clearly. Jim Thompson's glasses had a slightly thicker frame than David's. His wife's blonde hair had subtle highlights that Sarah's didn't. Their children were similar to the Wilson kids in age and general appearance, but not identical. Still, the overall effect was unsettling. If I squinted, I could easily mistake one family for the other. I introduced myself to Jim, mentioning that I lived next door to the Wilsons. "David and I were just talking about you," I said, testing the waters. Jim smiled politely. "Oh, I don't think David and I have spoken much beyond basic hellos at community events." "My mistake," I said quickly. "Must have been someone else." I chatted with them briefly, learning that Jim did indeed work in finance, specifically investment banking. His wife Kate was a part-time real estate agent. Their daughter was indeed named Zoe, and their son was called Tile Rex. exactly like the Wilson's son. By the time I rejoined Emma, I was thoroughly confused and slightly unnerved. I considered telling her about the strange similarities, but decided against it. She would probably attribute it to my poor facial recognition skills or suggest I'd had one too many beers. Instead, I began keeping a journal of my observations. The Wilson and Thompson families had the same structure: father, mother, teenage daughter named Zoe, younger son named Tyler. Both fathers wore glasses. Both mothers were blonde. Both families drove silver SUVs, though different makes and models. Both had moved to evergreen estates within the past year. As the summer progressed, I noticed more families in the neighborhood that followed similar patterns. The Millers on Elm Street, father with glasses, blonde mother, 2 children close in age to the Wilson and Thompson kids. The Garcias on Pine Avenue, father with glasses, though with a beard, mother with highlighted blonde hair though naturally brunette. According to Emma, daughter and son of similar ages. Was I going crazy, seeing patterns where none existed? Or was something genuinely strange happening in evergreen estates? I began taking walks around the neighborhood at different times of day, observing the families as they went about their routines. I noticed that many of them followed surprisingly similar schedules: morning walks or jogs between 6:30 and 7,000 a.m., children waiting for the school bus at 7:45 a.m., parents leaving for work between 8,000 and 8:30 a.m., evening walks with the family dog around 7,000 p.m. Even their yard maintenance followed patterns: lawn mowing on Saturday mornings, garden work on Sunday afternoons. It was as if everyone had received the same instruction manual for suburban living. One evening in late July, I was sitting on our back deck, nursing a whiskey and reviewing my notes, when David Wilson called over the fence. "Beautiful night," he said, raising his own glass in greeting. I nodded, closing my notebook casually. "Perfect temperature. Sarah and I are having a few people over this weekend for a small dinner party. Nothing fancy. You and Emma free on Saturday?" "Should be," I said. "I'll check with her, but I think we're open." David smiled. "Great. Around 7. The Thompsons will be there, and the Millers. Thought it would be nice to get some of the newer families in the neighborhood together." My pulse quickened. "The Thompsons. I didn't realize you knew them well." "Oh, we go way back," David said, taking a sip of his drink. "Jim and I worked together in Chicago before we both moved here." I frowned. "I thought you said you hadn't spoken much to Jim beyond basic hellos at community events." David's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Did I say that? Must have been thinking of someone else. Jim and I have known each other for years." Before I could respond, he glanced at his watch. "Better head in. Early meeting tomorrow. Let me know about Saturday." As he walked back into his house, a chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the evening breeze. I was certain David had told me he barely knew Jim Thompson, and now he was claiming they were old friends from Chicago. I pulled out my phone and did a quick social media search for both men. David's LinkedIn profile confirmed he'd worked at a software company in Chicago for 8 years before moving to our area. Jim's profile showed he'd worked at an investment bank in Boston during the same period. They couldn't have worked together in Chicago. One of them was lying or confused about his own past. The dinner party on Saturday evening started normally enough. The Wilsons' home was tastefully decorated, similar to ours in layout, but with different design choices. Emma and I brought a bottle of wine and a dessert, exchanging pleasantries with Sarah while David mixed drinks in the kitchen. The Millers arrived next, Robert and Jennifer, with their familiar glasses and blonde hair combination that I'd come to expect. I tried not to stare, but I couldn't help cataloging the similarities to the Wilsons and Thompsons. The same family structure, the same general appearance, even similar speech patterns and interests. When the Thompsons arrived, I watched carefully as David greeted Jim. They embraced like old friends, laughing about some shared joke. Throughout dinner, they referenced their time in Chicago together, mentioning specific restaurants and events that suggested a genuine shared history. But I knew this was impossible, unless one of their LinkedIn profiles was completely fabricated. They couldn't have worked together in Chicago. As the evening progressed, I found myself growing increasingly uncomfortable, noticing more and more similarities between the three couples. During dessert, I excused myself to use the bathroom. On my way back, I took a wrong turn accidentally, or subconsciously, I'm not sure, and found myself in the Wilsons' home office. I was about to leave when a document on the desk caught my eye. It was a letterhead from New Horizon Development Corporation, with the tagline "Building Better Communities." Below the letterhead was what appeared to be a report of some kind. I knew I shouldn't read it, but something compelled me to glance at the first paragraph. Subject: families continue to integrate well into the Evergreen Estates community. Behavioral synchronization is proceeding as expected, with minor deviations within acceptable parameters. Recommend continuing observation through Phase 2 before implementing community-wide expansion. My hands trembled as I carefully replaced the document exactly as I'd found it. Behavioral synchronization, subject: families. What kind of experiment was happening here? I rejoined the dinner party, trying to act normal while my mind raced with possibilities. Were the Wilsons researchers? Were we all part of some kind of social experiment? The conversation flowed around me as I smiled and nodded at appropriate intervals, watching these three seemingly identical families interact as if nothing was unusual. After we returned home that night, I couldn't sleep. Emma drifted off immediately, exhausted from the wine and conversation, but I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the evening in my mind. Around 3 in the morning, I got up and went to my office, determined to make sense of what I'd seen. I searched online for New Horizon Development Corporation, but found nothing beyond some vague references to sustainable community planning. No official website, no business listings, nothing concrete. I expanded my search to include behavioral synchronization and community experiments, but found only academic papers on social psychology and urban planning. As the sun began to rise, I made a decision. I needed more information, and the only way to get it was to look more closely at our neighbors, starting with the empty house across the street that had just sold the previous week. For the next few days, I watched as moving trucks came and went. I wasn't surprised when a silver SUV pulled into the driveway, disgorging a family of 4, father with glasses, blonde mother, teenage daughter, younger son, the Andersons, according to the welcome sign the community association had placed in their yard. I waited until the following weekend, when I knew they would be attending the community pool opening. Everyone would be there. It was the event of the summer, according to the neighborhood newsletter. While families splashed and socialized, I made my way to the Andersons' house, armed with a plate of cookies and a rehearsed story about welcoming them to the neighborhood. When no one answered my knock, I walked around to the back, as if checking to see if they were in the yard. Finding it empty, I tested the patio door. It was unlocked. I knew what I was doing was illegal, breaking and entering, but I had to know if my suspicions were justified. Inside, the house was immaculate, with furniture arranged in a layout strikingly similar to both our house and the Wilsons'. Family photos adorned the walls, showing the Andersons in various vacation spots and life events. I moved quickly to what I assumed would be the home office. Like in our house and the Wilsons', it was located at the back, overlooking the small wooded area. The desk was organized with a computer, a few books, and a closed laptop. I hesitated, then opened the laptop. To my surprise, it wasn't password protected. The desktop was clean except for a single folder labeled Evergreen Protocol. My heart pounding. I clicked on it. Inside were dozens of files with labels like behavioral metrics, integration timeline, and subject profiles. I opened the latter and found detailed dossiers on every family in Evergreen Estates, including mine. My hands shook as I read the entry about us. The Mitchell family represents Control Group A, naturally occurring family unit with no behavioral modifications or genetic optimizations. Subject: Adam Mitchell has demonstrated higher than anticipated observation skills and may require additional monitoring. Recommendation: increase synchronization exposure to normalize behavioral patterns. I scrolled through other entries, learning that the Wilsons were primary template family B, while the Thompsons were first-generation replication, Series B. The Millers were second-generation replication, Series B, and the Andersons, our newest neighbors, were third-generation replication, Series B. Replication. What did that mean? Were these people clones? Actors? Some kind of advanced robots? The files didn't specify, referring only to integration protocols and behavioral synchronization metrics. A document titled Project Overview explained that Evergreen Estates was a controlled community environment designed to test the efficacy of replicated family units in suburban settings. The ultimate goal was to develop perfectly balanced communities through careful population management and behavioral standardization. I felt sick. We had moved our family into some kind of experimental community where most of our neighbors were replicated family units, whatever that meant, and we were the control group, the baseline against which these replications were being measured. I quickly took photos of as many documents as I could with my phone, then carefully closed everything and left the house the way I had found it. My mind was reeling as I walked home, trying to process what I had discovered. That night, I showed the photos to Emma. I expected disbelief, maybe even concern for my mental health, but her reaction surprised me. "I've noticed it too," she said quietly. "The similarities, the way everyone seems to follow the same patterns. I thought I was imagining things. What do we do?" I asked. "Do we confront them? Go to the authorities? The media?" Emma shook her head. "We need more information first, and we need to be careful. If this is some kind of experiment, they're obviously powerful and well organized. They might not want their subjects walking away." We agreed to continue gathering information while planning our exit strategy. We would put the house on the market, claiming Emma had been offered a job in another state. In the meantime, we would act normal, participate in community events, and try not to arouse suspicion. For the next 2 weeks, we maintained our routine, while secretly packing essential items and important documents. I continued observing the neighborhood, noting how the various replicated families mirrored each other's behaviors, with slight variations that seemed designed to avoid obvious detection. Then came the neighborhood association meeting. These monthly gatherings were typically boring affairs discussing landscaping rules and community events, but attendance was strongly encouraged. Emma and I had attended each one since moving in, and skipping this one might raise questions. The meeting was held in the community center, with nearly every household represented. As we took our seats, I noticed David Wilson and Jim Thompson standing together near the podium, reviewing some papers. The similarity in their posture and gestures was uncanny, as if one was a slightly altered photocopy of the other. The association president, a woman named Patricia, who lived at the entrance to the development, called the meeting to order. After going through the usual agenda items, she announced a special presentation. "As many of you know, Evergreen Estates has been selected for a community improvement pilot program," she said, smiling broadly. "Tonight, we have representatives from New Horizon Development Corporation to explain the exciting changes coming to our neighborhood." My blood ran cold as David Wilson and Jim Thompson stepped up to the podium. They weren't just neighbors or subjects, they were part of whatever organization was running this experiment. "Thank you, Patricia," David began. "Jim and I are pleased to announce that Evergreen Estates has been so successful in its initial phases that we're ready to expand to Phase 3. Jim continued seamlessly, as if they shared one mind. "Phase 3 involves a more complete integration of community standards and behaviors. We've seen how well our neighborhood functions when families share similar values, routines, and approaches to daily life." David nodded. "To facilitate this next phase, we'll be introducing a new community wellness program, starting with optional health screenings for all residents next weekend." Emma's hand found mine under the table, squeezing it hard. We both understood what this meant. The health screenings were likely a cover for whatever process they used to create their replications. The presentation continued with details about the screening process, community benefits, and incentives for participation. Throughout it all, I noticed how the audience nodded in unison, their faces showing identical expressions of interest and approval. Only a few people, those I suspected were other control families, showed any hesitation or confusion. After the meeting, David approached us, his smile as friendly as ever. "Hope you two will sign up for the screenings. It's completely painless, just a quick scan and some blood work. The benefits to the community are tremendous. We'll definitely consider it," Emma said, her voice remarkably steady, "though we might be traveling that weekend. My mother hasn't been well." David's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened slightly. "I'm sorry to hear that. Family comes first, of course, but if your plans change, the screenings will be available all weekend." As we walked home, we didn't speak until we were safely inside with the doors locked. "We need to leave," Emma whispered. "Now, tonight." I nodded. "Pack only what we absolutely need. We'll tell the kids it's a surprise vacation." Within 2 hours we had loaded our car with essential items, woken our confused but excited children, and were ready to leave. As I backed out of the driveway, I noticed lights on in several houses along the street, including the Wilsons and the Andersons. It was nearly midnight. Why was everyone awake? As we reached the end of our street, a silver SUV pulled out behind us. Then another, and another. Soon, a line of identical vehicles was following us toward the neighborhood exit. "Adam," Emma said, her voice tight with fear. "They know." I pressed the accelerator, speeding toward the main road. In my rearview mirror I could see David Wilson driving the lead SUV, his face expressionless in the dashboard lights. The neighborhood gate was ahead, usually left open, but now ominously closed. I slowed, considering our options, then made a split-second decision. I veered off the road, driving across the carefully manicured community lawn toward a section of decorative fencing that looked less substantial than the main gate. "Hold on," I shouted as we crashed through the fence, metal and wood splintering around us. The car bounced violently as we hit the public road, but I maintained control, accelerating away from Evergreen Estates. The SUVs didn't follow. They stopped at the broken fence, their headlights illuminating our escape but going no further. As we sped down the highway, Emma called the police, reporting what we had discovered. The dispatcher sounded skeptical but promised to send officers to investigate. We drove through the night, stopping only for gas, putting as much distance as possible between us and Evergreen Estates. The children eventually fell asleep in the back seat, but Emma and I remained alert, watching for silver SUVs in our rearview mirror. By morning we had crossed 2 state lines. We checked into a motel under a false name, paid cash, and finally allowed ourselves to rest. Emma contacted a lawyer friend who agreed to meet us the following day. We showed him the photos I had taken, explained what we had seen and heard. He was skeptical at first, but the documentation was compelling. He agreed to help us bring the information to federal authorities who might have jurisdiction over such a case. 2 days later, we sat in an FBI field office, recounting our story to a pair of agents who took copious notes and examined the photos with great interest. They told us they would investigate but advised us to relocate temporarily for our safety. We did as they suggested, moving to Emma's parents' home several states away. Weeks passed with no news. Emma found a position at a local hospital, and I worked remotely. The children adjusted to their new school, though they often asked when we would return to our real house. 3 months after our escape, we received a call from one of the FBI agents. They had investigated Evergreen Estates but found nothing unusual, just a normal suburban neighborhood with confused residents who had no knowledge of any experiment. New Horizon Development Corporation appeared to be a legitimate real estate developer with no connection to behavioral research or community experiments. "But I have proof," I insisted, referring to the photos. "Sir, we've examined those images carefully," the agent replied. "They appear to be standard community planning documents that you've misinterpreted. There's no evidence of human experimentation or unauthorized behavioral studies." After the call ended, Emma and I sat in stunned silence. Had we imagined everything? Misunderstood normal community documents? Overreacted to coincidental similarities between neighbors? No, I was certain of what I had seen. The identical families, the synchronized behaviors, the documents explicitly describing replications and control groups. It had been real. A week later, a package arrived at Emma's parents' house, addressed to me with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with the New Horizon Development Corporation letterhead. The message was brief: Subject Adam Mitchell and family have been successfully extracted from the evergreen environment. Recommend continued remote observation. Subject has demonstrated remarkable pattern recognition and resistance to synchronization protocols. Consider for future template status once current investigation concludes. Maintain standard containment procedures. Below the message was a handwritten note. They're watching. They're always watching. I showed the letter to Emma, who read it with growing horror. What does it mean? Future template statuses, she whispered. I shook my head. I don't know. But it confirms we're still part of whatever this is. That night, as we discussed our options, changing our names, moving overseas, going completely off the grid, I happened to glance out the window. A silver SUV was parked across the street, its driver invisible behind tinted windows. As I watched, a family emerged from the house next door. A family I hadn't paid much attention to since our arrival. A father with glasses, a blonde mother, a teenage daughter looking at her phone, a younger son with a soccer ball. They walked to their silver SUV parked in the driveway, the father glancing briefly toward Emma's parents' house toward me, before they drove away. I stepped back from the window, my heart pounding. They had found us, or perhaps they had been here all along, waiting for us to arrive. How far did this experiment extend? How many neighborhoods? How many families? Emma joined me at the window, following my gaze to the now empty driveway next door. What is it? She asked. I couldn't bring myself to tell her. Not yet. Instead, I pulled her close, taking comfort in the realness of her, the unique person I had loved for 15 years. We'll figure this out, I promised, though I wasn't sure how. Later that night, as Emma slept, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, studying my face. Had my features always been this symmetrical? Had I always worn my hair in this particular style? Had I always preferred glasses with dark rims? I removed my glasses, half expecting my face to change somehow, to reveal something artificial beneath the surface. But it was just me, the same face I'd always known. Or was it? How would I know if I had been replaced? If I was now one of them, a replication designed to think it was the original. I leaned closer to the mirror, searching my eyes for some sign, some proof of my authentic self. But all I saw was my own reflection, staring back with the same questions, the same fears. And in the house across the street, I knew without looking that another man stood before another mirror, wearing the same expression, thinking the same thoughts. The perfect neighbor, the perfect replication, the perfect me.